What you can see here is the recent launch of NASA and SpaceX's Crew.
This is actually the first time NASA and SpaceX have worked together to launch Crew up into space. This ship docked at the International Space Station, and while it might have been the first, I doubt it will be the last. This ushers in a new age of space. For as long as I have remembered, the idea of living in space, or even just visiting it once, has always been on my mind. Now, the question is, can we actually do this? Yes, we send people up into space, but can we live there? While this may be a clip from the show The 100, it does beg the question, is this possible? Here you can see multiple space stations combined to make one great one. Here, hundreds, if not thousands of people live together. These pictures may look different from what we're used to here on Earth. Life is possible. It might not be easy to get around to, but I think if we use our current resources available and pour in tons into research, we might actually be able to pull this off. Here you can see inside the current ISS, International Space Station. If we were to truly pull this off, there'd be some questions, really big questions, which we need answering. To name a few, you'd have politics. How would we govern ourselves? How would the relationships of different countries work? Other questions could be food. How would we find sustainable food sources? Would we have to go back and forth between Earth and wherever we were? Would we be able to grow some in space? Next off, territory, which kind of falls under the policies in governing ourselves, but this is more physical than anything. How do we decide who gets what? Like, one day could one person own the moon, the next could someone own Jupiter? Does it work that easily? I feel like we would need to come together and sit down and have talks about all of these. If we look at one of my sources here, it's a story about a man who in the 1980s laid claim to the moon and all the other planets in our solar system. While this might seem completely outlandish and up for grabs, he did this by looking at what he thought was a loophole in the Outer Space Treaty, which was made in 1967 among the US and major countries. First things first, food. How would we eat? How would we sustain ourselves in space? Now, if we were to go by current food standards for astronauts, we would have dehydrated food, which is cooked here on Earth and then packaged, and then once they're ready to eat it up, they rehydrate it. While it might be off-putting to look at, it does give them the nutrients they need, and for the most part, the taste isn't too bad. Here you can see a picture of a Thanksgiving meal after it's been rehydrated. Now, it's not quite lavish as to what we eat here, but you know what? It's good enough. At least they get the Thanksgiving meal. Another thing is, they have conducted multiple experiments to do with lettuce. Now, why lettuce? Well, it's a green, it's a vegetable that gives you a lot of nutrients that you do need and your body needs it to function. Although the experiment they conducted proves that we can grow lettuce in space, which we have done, it doesn't necessarily tell us what exactly would happen if we were to grow other plants. Would this be bad for those on board? Would this have effects on us? There has to be better ways to find out the right answer. I think we need more time and more research to see how food we can grow will be good for us in space. While on the topic of food, water is an important one to discuss. The average human can only last a tenth of the length that we can go without food. So for water, that means we can only go 3 days without water. So on the ISS, how do they get water? Well, it turns out that from Earth, there is a storage of about 530 gallons of water, but that's not the main source. While 530 gallons might seem like a lot, in reality, considering how long they're up there, it's quite the opposite. At times, the mission length stretches from 3 to 6 months up in space. So how'd you get the water, you ask? Well, It turns out that they recycle the water from the shower, from the sink, and urine. I know it sounds weird, but you have to do what you have to do. So what they do is that they take the three and then they are combined and it goes through a process to purify it. And then the last step is treat it with iodine. That's what we use on the US side. However, on the Russia side of the ISS, they don't collect the urine. So sometimes our astronauts might go over and take that to aid our sources. But for the Russia side, the purification purposes, they use silver. Space. Now, how we get there. So, yes, we go up in rockets, but what is that impact on the Earth? What's left behind? Because who knows how long we're going to stay up there. We're going to want to come down eventually, probably. Now, currently, there's no mandated cutoff for the amount of emissions that rockets are allowed to release or produce. But considering the current climate change movement, I think this is bound to change. The average SpaceX rocket, upon launch, releases about 400 tons of burnt kerosene, in a few minutes. Now, if you compare that to the average car, that's about 2 centuries worth, 200 years worth of fuel used up in a few minutes. Think about how much could be done with that. In that short amount of time, what could we have done differently? See, the thing about these rockets are, apart from getting there, they can only take so many people. As you can see here, the average flight contains 7 astronauts. If the rocket can only take 7 to 8 people at a time, we would need to do multiple trips, which further damages both the economy and the environment. This would be a problem we need to sort out. With all of these said, I really think that we could live in space. However, all these problems would need to be sorted out, and I think that's going to take more time and more resources than we currently have available. So if we got more people to invest and spend more time, I think that this possibility of living in space could be very promising. It would be something for the records, something people could maybe possibly all enjoy as a collective. However, until all of this is sorted, and until that time we could all go up together, I guess we could enjoy videos like these, being reminded of the possibilities in the movies and shows we watch. But for now, I guess a couple people having the liberty of going up into space is better than none.